Welcome to They Live by Film, a film discussion podcast focusing on the Criterion Channel and beyond. My name is Adam Lundy, and I am joined, as always, by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. How are we doing
Hey, how's
today,
it going?
guys?
Good, you?
I am very well. Chris, how are you doing?
Doing great. I
Good.
said that last time was going to be the tooth extraction edition. I think this time is the COVID scare edition. Zach, how you doing?
So far so good. We'll see. I have this thing every morning now where I go up and find like something with fragrance. It's the first thing I do every morning. Like, okay, my ability to smell is still here and taste. So I do that every time I wake up now.
If you do test positive, I'd be curious to see which variant it is because now there's like three variants in the U.S., right?
Uh, I'll
If
probably
you
get the
can-
one they're not vaccinating for.
That's the way it goes. It's becoming like a true horror film. But hope you don't have it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Our thoughts go out to Zach, of course. So this week we're actually going to shake it up a little. Normally we do our collection corner right slap bang in the middle of the podcast, but Chris is just so excited to tell us about what he's done. We're going to move it right up to the front. So Chris, you take it over from here for the collection corner.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So. Couple things. First of all, market. What day are we at here? This is January 31st, 2021. We're officially all region free. I don't have my player yet. It's in the mail. So super dangerous for me, like I said last time. But I bit the bullet, and the first thing I did was found a limited edition Vengeance trilogy that Arrow put out. Not the one that was like the reasonably priced one. I went and found the out of print limited edition one that folded up like it had two doors that folded. Oh yeah. That's the one.
I just got it the other day too.
Shit, it's kind of expensive, but that's okay. That's the theme for this week. Is it's kind of expensive because I also found I mentioned a few weeks back we were talking about different releases. I think it was when we were doing favorite releases from each label for 2020, and I mentioned Frank Henenlotter's on the board for AgFilm. And I also realized that I never had actually splurged for the Brain Damage limited edition set that Arrow put out, and it's a hell of a splurge. I think it's over $100 I spent on this. I'm going to be totally honest with y'all, but I love Frank Henenlotter. He's a wacky dude, and he's really kind of one of the premier kind of artists in that low budget horror genre. So very happy to get that. And then Adam, based on your recommendation, I was lucky to find a region A of the Survivor ballads that you mentioned with the Raven on the cover. I'm realizing I'm holding these up to the camera and the Zoom chat as if that's going to mean anything.
I enjoy seeing it.
Thank you. And then that's it. I think what I'm going to try to bring next time. There's a couple labels where I'm trying to go complete with, or ones that I already have come complete with, like smaller ones, not like Criterion, but I think that's what I'm going to talk about next time. But for now, that's it. I'm a little bit nervous to see what's in store for me because my eyes started to drift a little bit into that second sight, Dawn of the Dead, and I've restrained myself as of yet, but it's a beautiful looking box set, so we'll see how long I can hold out.
I'm gonna just send you some pictures of it, like consistently. Like, look at it, Chris. Look.
that recurring meme of like the guy walking with his girlfriend, and then there's another lady like in the photograph, and he likes looking back. That's like the one his girlfriend is like region A, and then the one that he's like cheating on is all regions. That's what I feel like right now.
To be fair, Second Sight put out some great stuff. I only have one of their editions of the limited edition of Walkabout that they put out. Includes the
It's a
original
beautiful
novella, includes the script. Yeah, it's a really. I haven't actually gotten around to watching the film yet, which is always something that always happens when you buy a load of crap. But the set is gorgeous. So yeah, that's a really good release from Second Sight. I need to buy more of their stuff because they do put out some really, really nice editions.
Well, yeah, that's great. Thanks. What about y'all? How's y'all's week or
Well,
2 weeks in here?
I suppose I'll keep the theme going with region free stuff because I went region free just before Christmas, and I'm on a quest to find the most time efficient way of getting region A's over to Ireland, which is I've been doing experiments with ordering from different places and having various results. So It started off with me ordering from a website called Wow HD, which I had ordered from before when I had first sort of went to go and um, try and jailbreak my old PS3 to try and turn that all region, and it was just too complicated, so I didn't bother. But when I ordered from them that time, I ordered at Grand Budapest Hotel, and it only took about 2 weeks. So I thought, oh, great, perfect, I'll just use them in future. So I ordered on Christmas Eve. In fact, I ordered Hitchcock's Notorious and The Samurai, because both of them don't have Region B Blu-rays, which is pretty much the only reason why I'm going to be sort of buying Region A's if they don't have a Region B Blu-ray. And they have not arrived yet. They're still in limbo somewhere over a month now, and it's getting a bit crazy. So about 10 days ago or so, well, on the 20th of January, I said, okay, let me try Amazon. I'm going to try do some orders on Amazon.com. Obviously, Wow HD have free delivery, which is sort of why I attempted to go with them. But obviously, you get what you pay for it, free delivery. With Amazon, the delivery cost me about €15 to deliver 2 Blu-rays, which is Hitchcock's Rebecca and Blue Velvet, because again, neither of those have Region B Blu-rays. And they arrived in Ireland on Friday, so I should have them on Monday or Tuesday if everything goes to plan with the post. So a hell of a lot quicker turnaround time. And then I was talking to some guys on Reddit. Another Irish guy actually put a question in the sub asking, where to order stuff from. And I'd said Amazon based on my just experience in the last couple of weeks. And another guy came in and said, oh, you should try Deep Discount because they deliver to Ireland. And I didn't realize that Deep Discount delivered to Ireland. So yesterday I ordered Rosemary's Baby, which again doesn't have a Blu-ray in Region B. So I will be testing how fast that gets to Ireland, and then I'll just be deciding between the 3 which I go with in the future for my Region A criterions.
Wow, that's great. Like, I feel like Deep Discount really is a throwback for me. They were like the original Amazon for movies back in the early 2000s.
Their website looks like it's from the early 2000s. It's so bare bones.
Yeah.
Which I'm a little pissed at Deep Discount. They had made a price mistake about 3 weeks ago for the Hammer films. And then they sent me an email saying, yeah, you're not getting that, pretty much. I was like, thanks. I appreciate it.
It seemed to be pretty random. Some people, they went through if they paid with PayPal, and then other people, they got cancelled. I don't know how this works in America in terms of like your consumer law, but that shit would not fly in Ireland if they advertised that price.
Yeah, I've never had that happen. I'm not sure and then I heard Amazon did something sort of similar because they put Rad up for like $10, and a bunch of people ordered it. And I know I have a friend who lives down the road. He said he did it, and they canceled his and didn't even tell him. It's just not on his orders anymore.
Yeah,
like,
they're notorious for overselling pre-orders too. They it's like where they overbook flights on airlines sometimes. Like Amazon, it's really dangerous to order pre-orders from them. I've had one that they just didn't get. And
the last one I got the Tremors Arrow set, and I pre-ordered it, and it didn't come when it was supposed to, and I was just trying to make sure I was going to get it. So I called them and got redirected to South Africa for some reason. And they kind of went through and they gave me $20. They said, hey, it'll be here next week, but here's $20. I was like, cool, thanks. I'm not going to complain as long as it shows up.
Yeah. God, Deep Discount throws back some memories though. There used to be a site called DVD Talk, and then there's another one called the Digital Bits.
Mm-hmm.
I would go back and forth between the digitalbits.com, dvdtalk.com, and then Ain't It Cool News. I don't know if y'all remember that site. And then Deep Discount as well. Like, that's where I learned about movies, and then I would go buy a Deep Discount, whatever they recommended. that was like 3 years of my life. Anyways.
Now everything's Blu-ray.com.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I can't get into Blu-ray.com because I just don't like the look of the website.
Oh, it's terrible design.
I mean, in all fairness, though, like Reddit and Discord are both not necessarily UI friendly, right? We spend most of our lives on sites that are very basic.
At least they have apps. So, like, I never use the Reddit website, desktop website. I just use the app on my phone. The only time I've ever used Reddit on my computer was, do you remember before Christmas there was a few posts about the Or Criterion's map of world cinema posts.
Mm-hmm.
That was me. I was doing
okay.
those, and then things just got way too busy for me to continue. But yeah, that's the only time I was using Reddit on my computer, because I was putting everything together in Excel sheets and stuff, and it was
Yeah.
just easier to transfer it all from my computer rather than from my phone.
We'll keep going on those if you can get them. Those are cool.
Yeah, I like those posts. I remember those. It's been a while.
Yeah, I see. It started really well with like the high engagement, and I just kind of realized then how much people on the Criterion subreddit just talk nonsense about knowing about films, because the sort of more what's the word? I don't know, just the further away from America I got with like my top 10 lists, the smaller the engagement was, and the smaller the size of the list people were posting. And I kind of realized, like, how have people not seen 10 Japanese films? And I'm like, oh, maybe a lot of people on this sub just don't watch as much films as other people do.
I think there's a lot of that's another podcast. I think there's a lot of voyeurs on Reddit just in general, even boutique Blu-ray. I don't think there's a lot of people that actually like just watch a ton of film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Reddit, of course, has its hive mind problem. It always has. It's, certain philosophies get thrown into certain subreddits, and if you go against that, then you're downvoted. I get that every time I bring up, anytime the discussion of Criterion should go 4K should go up. And I'm not even in like a super camp that says it's ridiculous that they don't. I was like, every other boutique's moved there. Maybe they should do it too. Downvoted every time. I'm like, okay,
Just
we're not
the
going to
echo
discuss
chamber,
it.
isn't it? Yeah.
I was like, we're not going to discuss the 4K thing. I got it.
Oh, that's interesting. People get mad when you bring it up.
Well, usually the discussion's already started, and I just kind of go in, bring in my point that, Eureka, Arrow, Scream, Vinegar, Sevron, they've all went 4K. And it's like, I think all of them have. I have to recheck, but
I don't think Eureka
almost every
have.
boutique has went 4K in some way. And they're kind of the last one. And I guess for me, when when you think of Criterion, it's like best format, best picture quality, and it's like, well, they're kind of getting behind on the new format. And I get it; it's expensive format, but it's like, I mean, there's been few on these smaller boutiques that have been able to do it. Kino's doing it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we got to jump into the film, but just one more thing I was thinking of when you brought that up about picture quality. I was really proud because one of the things I've been working on in the last, I guess 2 years or so is kind of filling in the out of print Criterion releases, hopefully the early ones, which are mostly DVDs. And we're talking about the Samurai series. Adam, we were chatting on Discord. I watched the first one as well, or rewatched the first one as well. The picture quality is not good.
It's even worse for the second one, dude.
Really?
Second one, I was really disappointed, because I think the first one, it has, even though it's not like super HD, it has like this nice film grain charm to it.
Yeah.
Second one, it's kind of weird. They flip. The first one, really poor writing, really nice looking. Second one, not very nice looking, but much better writing.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I was surprised to see that. So I guess thank you. I'll brace myself now when I get back to the second one. But it looks like a VHS copy.
Yeah, there's one particular scene in question where they're like having a showdown at a bridge, and it's like they wanted to make it a nighttime scene, but they didn't shoot it at nighttime, and they just sort of try and darken it in post, and it just looks terrible.
Okay.
And the sound isn't good either. It has like every time someone talks, you can hear like the kind of distortion. So it's not the best transfer in the world, but hey ho. I suppose before we move on to discussing the films, and Zach, was there any pickups you had in the last little while?
Yeah, I've recently this week I have decided I'm going to finish up my John Carpenter collection. I had like half of everything I needed, and I was like, you know what? It's time for me to go waste a bunch of money. I had actually put it on hold because Scream Factory was putting out like all of his stuff on Steelbook. And I have them all. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get in Mouth of Madness until that comes out on Steel. Well, that was 2 years ago, so it ain't coming probably. Or once I actually get it, it'll be announced. One of the other. Yeah.
Wasn't one of his films just released on 4K recently?
Actually, France. I think it's France. I don't know which country I do, but I'm going to get it from FNAC or whatever. They have 4 of them that have gotten 4K, which is Escape from New York, The Fog, They Live, and Prince of Darkness.
That's the one.
And
that's the one I saw.
Yeah, and now Scream has actually released They Live and Prince of Darkness in 4K, but not in Steel. So they're going through they're going through doing that. So as soon as I finish this Carpenter collection, it'll continue. But I decided to order from Amazon Japan for the first time. And I'm getting a really nice box set. I don't know who makes it. I don't know much about Japanese releases, but it's for his first film, Dark Star, which was a student film turned into a feature-length film. I have never seen it. It's probably the only Carpenter film I've never watched. But yeah, it has a bunch of different stuff with it. It looks like, I've always heard Japan releases are always really nice. They put a lot of work into them. So I'm excited to get it. We'll see how long shipping takes, probably a month. All right, so for our first film, we're going to be talking about Elevator to the Gallows, a 1958 French film about a self-assured businessman murders his employer, the husband of his mistress, which unintentionally provokes an ill-fated chain of events. All right, so what do you guys think?
You can definitely say that for sure in terms of the chain of events. It's like I really like the film. I like Louis Malle in general. I think he's a really intelligent filmmaker. I think someone said he made this when he was 24, which in itself is like insane. That's just insane to me to think that this dude was able to put together something so assured at such a young age. He's clearly a smart guy. He clearly knows a lot about cinema, crime cinema, film noir, especially. I really like the film. This wasn't my first time seeing it. I watched it. I want to say maybe back in June or July, sort of early summer, and I loved it then. I didn't love it as much this time, the second time around, but the film is still really, really, really freaking cool.
I just want to know how a 24-year-old in France what year did this come out? This came out in 58?
58, yeah.
Knows Miles Davis.
Yeah, how did he swing that shit? Like 58, like actually I never even thought to look this up in terms of Miles Davis, like how into his career. I assume Miles Davis is well into his career at this point. When did Kind of Blue come out?
Yeah, I was just looking at it. I was just about to look at it. 1959.
Oh, okay. So Miles probably hadn't popped yet because Kind of Blue was kind of like his his magnum opus, really. Like,
but even that, like how did he, like, it's just this weird chain of events. Like we were talking about the reality of Agnes Varda being in the Bay Area to be able to record her short film about Black Panthers a few weeks back, and like it's kind of the same thing. Like, how did they know that Miles Davis was like one of the greatest jazz recording artists ever, and have access to him at 24? It's just this crazy. I don't know what was happening in France in the 50s and 60s. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's insane. I didn't actually consider that. Like, obviously, the score is what a lot of people sort of remember the film by, and for good reason. The score is incredible. I've listened to it before we watched this film. I listened to it since we've watched the film. It's a really incredible score. It's so moody. It's just the moodiest bluesy score.
I know why. Sorry to cut you off. Because he had already put out Birth of the Cool.
Oh, yes.
I bet you that probably made its way to France. I bet you that would have.
Jazz, or France are super into their jazz anyway. So I think someone mentioned it in their discussion about the sort of European cafe scene. Was obviously huge at that time, but it's still mind blowing that that at 24 making, I assume, was sort of largely independent, because I don't see how he could have secured major funds to make this film at 24 either, with no sort of prior films.
Right.
It's still crazy to think he could have got Miles Davis to go and score his film.
Yeah, crazy. Anyways, who knows? It's maybe better left to the imagination. But as far as the film itself, I had seen Zazie dans le Metro about 2 weeks before I saw this, just by total coincidence. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit surprised at how different those films are, but it kind of made me love it even more. I'm always impressed with directors that sort of can play between genres, and they just seem to be competent directors that just kind of know how to tell a story, and it almost doesn't matter the genre. I think I'm not going to try to draw comparisons between those films. They're so different. But maybe just his fluidness between genres, and an ability to kind of take some risks. I think this film jumped out to me just for being very creative. If you can kind of leave logic aside in terms of the likelihood that all of these things would happen in the same night around the same time, for there to be this other young kid that was, kind of wanting to feel rebellious and steal his car for the 2 minutes that he was supposed to run upstairs, and in those 2 minutes the elevator gets turned off, like all of those things that, they're probably not going to happen right around the same time. But if you can leave that aside for a second and just go with it, like, it's a really creative and kind of well written, series of events that all tie in together, and make it a very entertaining watch.
I think they balanced everything well. Is the key part here, because you essentially have three sort of linear stories that are sort of going alongside each other. Obviously, the businessman who's stuck in the elevator, his mistress, or Jean Moreau, doing Jean Moreau best of moodily walking around Parisian streets. I assume it's Paris. I don't know if they ever say for sure, but I assume it's Paris. Just her walking around moody, just doing her thing. And then you have obviously the two kids who go on their sort of Bonnie and Clyde-esque crime spree. And the fact that they balance all three stories, like, you never really feel anyone's been underutilized or that anyone sort of overstays their welcome either. I think the pacing of the film, it's not even that long. I think it's pretty much like 90 minutes on the dot. The pacing of the film with the three stories really, really well done.
Well, going back to what you were talking about, like not anyone overstaying their welcome. One thing I thought was interesting is you kind of assume, I can't remember his name right now, but the guy who killed what's his face at the beginning, you kind of assume he's going to take up a big chunk of the runtime, because I mean that's who you start with. You're kind of put in his perspective, and really they use what's necessary of him, and then he shows up a little bit more. He shows up in quick flashes, and then he shows up a little bit more towards the end after he gets out of the elevator. But no, I think the assumption would be try to use him as much as possible. But I kind of actually enjoyed that they didn't overuse him at all.
I think it's kind of like, and we can talk a little bit more about its context as a French New Wave film, because one could argue it's probably the first French New Wave film just in terms of timelines, because the film that's arguably called the first French New Wave film is Chabrol's Le Beau Serge, but this actually came out about 6 months earlier than that. I think it sort of harks into what Godard and Truffaut would do later, especially with Truffaut with Shoot the Piano Player. We talked about how the main character in that clearly didn't want to be in a film noir, and in this film, Louis Malle almost takes his main character out of the reckoning, whereas in a normal film noir, you would follow that character, but instead he just takes him out of action within the first 10 minutes of the film, and sort of turns other things on its head. Jean Moreau, who you could claim is like a femme fatale. She's morally grey. Well, I suppose technically she's not even morally grey. She planned to kill her husband with the guy she's sort of sleeping with. But you could call her the femme fatale. It's sort of like what Truffaut and Godard would do later in a few years' time, with taking noir tropes and sort of inverting them slightly. Louis Malle does here as well.
Yeah, I also like the kind of mythical status that Tavernier had in the story. The way that people, like, his character kept coming up. You're right, Zach. Like, the story didn't centralize on him, but I like that the way that they kind of talked about him was this sort of like, he was this war hero, and he was this kind of like larger than life character, and like, he's the type of guy that is like Liam Neeson in Taken, right? Like, nothing goes wrong for this character, and he gets bested by an elevator and somebody leaving for the building for the day just by total coincidence shutting the power off, and that foils like this perfectly laid plan. And I thought that was a nice kind of touch, because then it follows these two kind of knuckleheaded kids, and they almost get away with extremely sloppy crime. Like, they're on the opposite end of planning. They're just kind of completely going by the seat of their pants, and like they almost get away with it. Eventually fate and luck kind of catches up with them because they're idiots. But like, those two extremes I thought were fun to kind of watch and play against each other, because one had the perfect plan and just got interrupted because somebody knocked on the door before he had a chance to take the rope down. So that's the whole reason, like the whole story kind of unfolded, was that he got interrupted from his plan. And then the two kids that were just kind of winging it, they almost got away with it, and as well, except for just one thing here and there that they kind of got in the way. So it almost had like a, I don't want to make too much out of it. I think it was a lighter film, but it almost had kind of that same philosophical thing that seems to be running through a lot of new wave films of like life is just kind of unpredictable, and we were going to talk about Shoot the Piano Player. We were talking about how it's I'm trying to think of the word now. It's escaping me, but anyways, yeah, like so there's elements of life you just can't control, and I think that was a big theme here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like this actually a lot more than I thought I would. It's actually since I've been on the podcast, I know I missed the very first episode. This has actually probably been my favorite of what we've watched. There's definitely some, logical inconsistencies. There's small things like that. But I just really appreciate any script that, most scripts should do this. They just don't do it well, is the setup and payoff. And I think they do that in this film really well. Sometimes it goes in a predictable way, but I'd rather them go in a predictable way, setup and payoff, than just try to subvert the expectation. We know the camera's going to come back and play. We know him leaving his jacket and the gun are going to come back and play. I mean, you can see where it's going, but it feels kind of almost like a cathartic watch because you're like, okay, I can map this out too, and it's kind of fun to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Did either one of y'all read the novel by chance?
No.
I didn't even know it was based on a novel. I'm not going to lie.
That's okay. I was just curious to, just on the off chance, because it kind of made me want to read it to see how much there was, artistic kind of freedom taken, or if this was the story of the novel. Because I can imagine if you had read this novel and like this is the story in the book, then it would have felt like an exciting one to tell on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it sort of goes down. Like again, we can't really say too much if none of us have read it, and we don't really know how much it sticks. But if it was that kind of novel where each chapter is told from different points of view, they definitely did a good job of sort of moving that to screen, with the pacing and sort of jumping between the different of the three stories that were coming through. But with this one, even though, especially sort of compared to maybe American cinema, at the time, especially American crime cinema, which is sort of coming towards the end of the film noir era at this stage, it's still a lot more anarchic than what you would expect from something in American crime film in terms of its structure and maybe its sort of plot points, and how it doesn't have its leading man front and center trying to sort of solve the problem. And this is where I start to think where it sort of comes into the French New Wave and what they were hoping to achieve by taking cinematic tropes and sort of inverting them or trying to flip them or just trying to change them up. It's not as anarchic as like Godard or something like Shoot the Piano Player or something like that. It's still at heart very much a crime film, but there's just something obscure about how Mal tells the story. And I know that we've watched two French New Wave films now, Hiroshima Mon Amour and Shoot the Piano Player. Obviously, this one is a lot more like Shoot the Piano Player, just in terms of a genre. But I'm going to keep saying this. I've said this in a couple of podcasts now where we've brought it up. But I think it really harks to the what's the word? The variety with what you get with French New Wave. I suppose you brought up Zazie dans le Metro, so I suppose that's actually a perfect comparison as well, because it's the same filmmaker, a few years apart, part of this same movement. And Zazie dans le Metro is like running through a candy store while you're already had so much sugar, and this film is just kind of like sitting having a whiskey in a dark alley somewhere. It's just completely different moods. But obviously same filmmaker, same technically film movement. Like, would you call this film a French New Wave film, or would you more sort of link it with sort of 50s crime films that Melville was doing? Because there's a lot of Melville in this as well. So where would you guys put this? Maybe on the threshold between the two?
Well, I'm going to let you guys take this one. I am very not very keen on French New Wave. I don't know much about it at all.
No, it's good. There's somebody in our Discord brought up the idea of Bob Laflambeau even being a possible French New Wave, and I, the line starts to get a little bit blurry when you really break down kind of the core elements of what they were trying to do, right? Like Louis Malle didn't seem to be part of the Left Bank crew,
No.
and he wasn't part of the cinema journal that a lot of the kind of known directors came out of. So here's this kind of guy like lonely on an island here, just making super interesting films. But I think it doesn't go into like an official movement, but it certainly feels like the same style, and like maybe there must have been something in the water in France, just if they weren't talking and didn't know each other, because here's another guy that came out and sort of made some very creative genre films that were playing against the expectations of the genre. You could even make an argument that the Miles Davis soundtrack didn't really fit the movie that well, but it, in a weird way, it did. Like I think it was mostly improv. I hope I got that right. And it kind of felt that way. Like, I don't know that the music always supported the film in the way that scores typically do. But even in that, it kind of felt anarchic and fun and a little bit just unpredictable and kind of exciting. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely put this into that category if anybody's asking my opinion. um, it just feels like the same like the same goal and kind of mission of what a lot of those other filmmakers were doing. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that point. I do sort of see where that, whoever that was, it could have even been me, because I do definitely see a lot of French New Wave nuances with Bob Laflambeau. I'm not going to call it a French New Wave film, but there's a lot of nuances with how Melville makes that film, and some of the decisions he made with plot devices and things like that. There's certainly a lot of nuances there that can put it into French New Wave, and I think this one is sort of the same. It's not quite as anarchic, but it does enough with the inversion of tropes that I think it. Yeah, for me, I would call it the first French New Wave film. If someone was to press me for a number one, what was the very first one that sort of embodies the movement? And I would say Elevator to the Gallows.
I wouldn't argue with that. I just would argue that Jean-Pierre Melville had the coolest sunglasses in every picture that he was in. And I might not be giving credit to his sunglasses.
I need to look that up now.
This is completely random. It's just the whole time when I was watching the movie, I kept having to remember that France still had the guillotine at this point, and for some reason, it just, I don't know, it's like something weird. I'm like, wouldn't have even imagined they'd still have it, but apparently they had it to like the 1970s.
Yeah.
Because they kept talking about like, oh, my head's gonna roll, and I'm like, wait, are they not using like a noose at this point? I was like, oh, they just kept that thing around. That's kind of awesome.
Maybe Oshima saw this and was inspired to make Death by Hanging.
Yeah.
Don't know how you can make Death by Hanging with a guillotine. Just be a head on its own, just a head talking. I am not R. What? It's like a scene in a house or something.
One thing I did notice, and I guess I could be a little bit more noticeable and stuff like this, and I guess it does come from him being young. There were some weird editing choices. I don't know if they ever like stuck out to you guys or not. And one that really stuck out to me is such an odd choice, and I just feel like it just wasn't set up the right way. There's a part where he's finally able to open the door, like in the elevator, and he's to look out. And he can't go through it, obviously, but he can look out. And then the scene immediately cuts to his mistress looking through the gate, and it almost makes it look like that's what he sees, because it shows him looking, and then it cuts to her looking on the other side, and I'm like, and it kind of took me out for a second, because I was trying to figure out the layout of the building, I guess. I was like, can they see each other? But I did notice a few little things like that, which I don't know, maybe it was just me. It just kind of stuck out to me, and it might be where he was young at the time. He was like, you said 24, right?
Yeah, 24 when he made this, and I think this was his first feature. It definitely could be that. I know Goddard used to do that a lot with his breaking of the. Do you guys know about the 180-degree rule in film
Mhm.
editing? So you're never supposed to break like if you think of a scene where characters are talking to one another, so your characters will always be looking one way, and
Mhm.
they should never you should never be looking at the other side of their face at any point during the scene. So you should always stay within 180 degrees. So if you have two characters and one, say character A is looking right and character B is looking left, you should never move the camera to the other side of their head so that person A is now looking left and person B is now looking right. It's called the
Mhm.
180-degree rule in film. I know Goddard used to love breaking that and sort of other sort of filmmaking conventions. So maybe we'll say he was trying to break an editing convention, but I think it's probably just more so a case of just being a bit inexperienced. I suppose one other just quick French New Wave little fun fact, or I don't know if you noticed this, Chris, because I know that you're a fan of this film. Did you notice a certain actor as a hotel guest in Elevator to Gallows, one of the guys who was playing chess?
Oh, I no, I guess I don't have this handy, but I'm looking it up right now to see if I can. But go ahead. What is it?
It is Jean-Claude Brierly, who from A Woman
Wow.
is a Woman,
Makes
Anna
an uncredited
Anna
appearance in
Karina's
August. You're right.
Anna Karina's
Wow.
boyfriend from A Woman is a Woman, which is
Yeah.
a great Godard film, which is my favorite Godard film. Yeah, he's one of the guys who's playing chess and one of the witnesses
One of the greatest actors to be
playing chess.
an uncredited scene in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just noticed that. I thought it was cool, and I know that you're a fan of that film as well, so I just wanted to see if you noticed it as well.
Embarrassed to say I didn't, but yeah, up until I recently reordered my top 100, that was in my top four. So I love that movie a lot.
Oh, it's great little movie. It's such a sweet film. You can't really hate it.
And talking about genre, I know this isn't, we're not talking about A Woman is a Woman, but like just it's one of my favorite ones of fully diving into a musical, in this case, just a genre, in this case it's musicals, and there's no music in it, but it's like you would still leave feeling like you're watching a musical.
Yeah, it has the that sort of jovial atmosphere. I think Anna Karina sings one song in the whole film, and that's like when she's doing her striptease routine because that's her
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
And that's it. Like, so it's weird that you'd call it a musical when there's practically no music in it at all. Um, I wish that was on the channel so I could put it in a vote one time because I think more people should watch it.
Oh, so good.
If I can convince one person to watch Blade Runner, then that's my job done.
What did you think about 2049? Just curious.
I haven't watched it. I haven't watched it.
Watched 2049 yet?
I've seen Blade Runner about easily, and I'm not even exaggerating at this point, because when I first got the DVD when I was 16, I watched it like so often. I say I've easily seen Blade Runner about 25 times. And I haven't watched it in about 7 years because I just used to watch it like back to back when I was like 16, 17 when I was first getting into film. And I haven't watched it in about 7 years. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm gonna sort of say this all again when we're going into this. But I was afraid I wasn't gonna like it as much. But Jesus, I fucking love Blade Runner. It's such a good film.
Are you watching Final Cut?
Oh yeah, Final Cut always.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
Always
I know
Final
it.
Cut.
I can't remember when it finally came out, so I was like, I didn't know if you'd seen it yet or not.
Yeah, no. Well, I recently upgraded the Blu-ray like last year, and then I still hadn't gotten around to watching it. Actually, I still have the DVD I bought when I was 16 on my shelf somewhere, but then I upgraded it to Blu-ray. But like I've seen the making of Blade Runner, the Dangerous Days documentary, more than I've seen like other films. Like I watched that. That's like the film. That's like the making of documentary for me. It's so good. It's so because I had such a troubled production. It's such an interesting making of. If you have the final cut on Blu-ray, you more than likely have that documentary on the disc. It's so good. It's called Dangerous Days: The Making of Blade Runner.
Okay, I'm gonna watch that next time.
It's stupid good. The making of it is just so interesting. Just about how like David Lynch was linked at some point, but then they wanted Ridley Scott. But at the time, Ridley Scott was linked to Dune, and then it sort of switched, and David Lynch went to Dune, and then they were able to get Ridley Scott in, and they had so many different actors that they wanted in the main role till they went for Harrison Ford. Probably the most famous be Dustin Hoffman. There's even like storyboards where they drew Dustin Hoffman in the storyboard. That's how sure they were going to get Dustin Hoffman in the role. Yeah, it's such an interesting. Just the whole production of that film is just super interesting to me. But yeah, that brings me back to the point. No, I haven't seen 2049. I
think
need to
you
remedy
like
that.
it. I mean, a lot of people I think a little bit overpraise it, but I do like it.
I think
I
that's
think
just Villanueva in general. People just
yeah.
he's like the new Chris Nolan. Everyone just like loves him, and then they'll probably now hate him after Dune. They'll probably go like the
Oh
Christopher
yeah.
Nolan route. I feel bad for Chris Nolan because I do have a soft spot for him.
I like Nolan. Yeah, I don't think any of his films are perfect. I think they're all like heavily flawed, but I appreciate that the ambition. I appreciate the ambition every time I watch
Yeah.
this.
I like my experience with Nolan is like Memento and Following, like those early films when I was working at Blockbuster and those would come out. And I mean, I know he's gone on to obviously like in the Dark Knight series and stuff, but just like I think he's a very creative voice and kind of storytelling, and I think he's willing to take big risks and stuff. So I'll always defend him for that.
I think
he's the only person who could come up with a new IP and get paid $200 million for it.
Oh yeah, like Warner Brothers, they don't care. Like they will just give him any the money he wants, which I think now it's what's hampered him in his last couple of films because he has too much. He can do he has too much control now. I think, you know, with Tenet it was just a wild mess.
I haven't seen it yet. I need to.
It's just a wild mess.
Oh, so it's like
it looks gorgeous, but it's just a wild mess. Dunkirk isn't great. Interstellar is majorly flawed. Inception, I think, is
still
perfect.
Like the high point for me.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna say Inception is perfect, and then I realized no, The Prestige is perfect. I love Inception because that is the film that got me into film. Like that came out when I was 16, and it just changed my whole outlook on film as an art form. So like that's like I'll always love that film for what it did for me. Obviously, I've seen a lot better films since, but I'll always have appreciation for that film for what it did for my love of film.
I think that was kind of the high point for him too, in terms of like he was full Nolan, but he still had some studio constraints, right? It was kind of like that balance.
Yeah.
Because I feel like after Inception, they just gave him a blank check.
Oh yeah,
they did. They definitely did. It's just like this dude go make because they knew it was guaranteed money. Like his name is he kind of became like the Spielberg of the sort of 2010s. Like if you put his name on it, he will guarantee you money. So just let him make whatever he wants.
Yeah, and for the most part, it's true. Like even Dunkirk was a big success financially.
And I like Dunkirk. It's one of those ones I like more every time I watch it. It's just I don't think it's like I don't want to say not well edited. It's not well structured, and I think that's my biggest issue with it. Like I feel like the pacing's just so off. Like every time I watch it, I won't get too much into it.
But I think that was more of his like he was married to this concept of having the same timeline but from different characters' perspectives, and he became so married to that concept it kind of like everything had to be sort of squashed into a particular way, and it almost sort of marred how the film could be structured because he was so married to this concept.
But
I agree with that.
I'm gonna start using. I just saw Hannibal for the first time last night. You know the 2001 film, the
Ridley Scott movie.
Yeah, sequel to Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna start using Hannibal as my reference point for just like terrible, boring, mediocre filmmaking from like accomplished directors. It's famous for like the brain eating scene, and like it had like Anthony Hopkins was scary because he's Anthony Hopkins, like he's great. But there's so many lazy choices in that movie. But is it y'all's favorite film, by the way, before I shit all over it?
No, the TV show did it a lot better.
I haven't seen Hannibal in a bit. It's probably been about 10 years since I've seen Hannibal. I remember a Ray Liotta brain eating scene, obviously, because everyone does, but I remember very, very little other than that. It's
just like Ridley Scott has some of the most. We're talking about Blade Runner. Just so many creative films, like in his background and in his filmography, and this one was just not like there was some terrifying stuff in it, but it's all from the book. So like all you had to do is kind of like
he's the most frustrating director in the world, I think, because like he goes from making like Alien and Blade Runner, and he just makes so much cookie cutter shit as well. Like he's so frustrating as a director because you kind of wonder like, did he get lucky with Alien and Blade Runner? Did he get lucky with those films, or was it maybe the writing is what elevated them? Yeah.
But then he's so hot and cold. Like those two, and then he has Gladiator in the early 2000s, which I think is fun.
Has he made a film? I don't think he's made a film as good as Gladiator in the last 20 years, has he?
I'm just looking it up now.
I'm actually pulling up his.
I'm doing it as well. I'm pulling up his filmography.
Oh, they announced a Gladiator 2?
That has actually been in the works since the first one. And
and it's batshit crazy.
Ever.
Have you heard what it's like about the original idea for it?
Yeah,
it's like he ends up like going through time and some shit. It's like it's the most batshit crazy concept for a sequel ever. It's almost like a joke. If they go ahead with it, like it'd be big balls Ridley Scott if he actually goes ahead with that as a concept.
I hope he does. The Martian. Yep. I would say The Martian is fun.
Yeah, Martian's good.
I haven't seen The Martian actually. I can't really comment on that one.
And I will be the person who defends Prometheus until I die. I will defend that movie.
Characters are so stupid.
I know, but I like so much about it.
It's a fun film. I'm not gonna shit on Prometheus either. It's much better than Covenant.
I like Damon Lindelof as a writer, which is also controversial because
definitely.
I love Damon Lindelof. I grew up a Lost fan, so I've kind of followed his career since then. I think Leftovers is some of his best work. But I liked what he did with Prometheus. You can kind of tell that he struggles with a movie format. Like he needs long form storytelling to really do anything, because otherwise he's just like, let me get all this exposition out of the way in the first 10 minutes so I don't have to touch it anymore.
Yeah.
But isn't the big knock on him, because I've seen all of Lost all the way to the last episode, and the biggest knock on him is that he's an incredible writer who just struggles to finish, right?
Well, I guess you could say that. Now, personally, I like the ending of Lost. I do think the last season's particularly weak, but I like the last episode. I think with him...
the last episode is sort of misread by a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's... For Lindelof, he also, you can tell he has this almost this principle of, I refuse to hold anyone's hand if I don't have to. So that works. And if you like to read into it and come up with there are things in Lost that'll be called unexplained that you can kind of fit together and say, okay, that's the explanation. He doesn't tell it to me, but that's the explanation for it. And you set yourself up to get a lot of shit for that. You can, I'm not going to sit here and say that's good or bad writing, but you're setting yourself up for people to hate your work. And I think that's what you're either going to appreciate that about him or you're going to despise him for it.
Speaking of Christopher Nolan, there's this podcast I really like called Blank Check, where this comedian and this film critic are they do trivia together. They're friends, and they get on and they just talk about movies. And the theme of the podcast is directors that had huge commercial success, and then what's the next film they made when they had a blank check. And because usually they're bad is the premise. Mm-hmm. So I think Chris Nolan might fit into some of that, which is the connection in my brain. But
yeah,
they're always talking about this concept. And the funny thing is they start by the Star Wars, the first episodes 1, 2, and 3, and they do a bit where they say there's no other movies that exist in the universe in the world called Star Wars, and somehow this guy named George Lucas, who did some films in the 70s. And 80s, got funding through a toy company, and he had his free reign to make 3 films, and they just put on the first 3 movies because they're pretty rough. Even in the Star Wars universe, they're pretty rough. But then, especially if you peel it back and think of if you don't know anything about Darth Vader, if you don't know anything about Luke Skywalker, if you don't have that background, if you're just oh, what's this Star Wars interesting? You come out of a cave and watch it, the movie holds no logical foundation.
It's a kids movie that puts politics in it, and it's the most amazing thing to watch, because you're this is made for kids, and here we are talking about trade politics for 30 minutes.
Right.
I unironically love The Phantom Menace. I'm not even ironic about it. I love that fucking film.
Well, they hated The Phantom Menace until they saw Attack of the Clones, and then until they saw the Return of the Sith, or anyways, episode 3.
Sith, yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're Attack of the Phantom Menace is amazing. That was kind of their premise. It's
Well, Attack of the Clones is pretty dreadful. It had so much promise in terms of, but it's just the middle of the film is just complete nonsense.
But
Like,
that meme potential is what it's there for.
yeah, and I think Revenge of the Sith is better than Return to the Jedi. Don't crucify me, but I think Revenge of the
I
Sith is
agree with
better
that.
than Return of the Jedi, and it's a hell of a lot better than any of the three new ones. But
I like Last Jedi.
What's
I
episode 9 called?
Jesus, that's
Return
a
of
much
Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, that's I love Star Wars, and I struggle to remember that because that's how bad that film is. It's just dreadful.
Which we should have a podcast where we talk about Last Jedi because I'll defend that one as well. I'm going to be the one that that likes for me.
Last Jedi, Last Jedi, right? I have no problem. Last Jedi is probably the most rewatchable of the three. Like it's kind of weird because obviously everyone talks about how the first Force Awakens is just basically a remake of A New Hope. And in a way, Last Jedi is kind of the same because they both have the weird time logic inconsistencies where, you know, they leave whatever planet that was that they were hiding out on, and they're like, oh, we're going to run out of fuel in 24 hours, but yet Rey does her entire Jedi training in that time, and it has the same sort of weird time inconsistency as Empire did, because everyone's like, okay, were Han and Leia flying around for 3 weeks, or did Luke knock out his training in 2 days? So like it has the same weird time inconsistency that mirrors Empire Strikes Back. But Last Jedi, I think my problem is with Last Jedi, and what really sort of got me, like, Force Awakens is not a perfect movie, but I think it does a great job of setting up a trilogy. And The Last Jedi goes and deconstructs every single setup that the previous film made. It's the most nonsensical thing ever was having 3 different writers on each part of a trilogy.
Yeah,
it just makes no sense at all. Like, it's because the first thing you see, like, the whole point of Force Awakens, to make such a big deal of Luke's lightsaber, and within 2 minutes of that film opening, Luke throws away the freaking lightsaber, and it's just like,
I'm always confused what Disney was expecting hiring Ryan Johnson. Like,
it's like they've never seen a Ryan
really
Johnson
like
film.
Ryan Johnson, but it's like, what did you expect he was going to do? He isn't going to just make just a Star Wars movie. He's going to put his own spin on it because that's just the type of writer he is. And I was like, yeah, y'all shouldn't have been that surprised.
And I like Ryan Johnson as a director. I just don't think he's a very good writer. I think he's good at writing concepts, but I don't think it's great in what's the word, execution.
I think he has his influence. I mean, the guy loves noir, and
Rick will tell you that for sure.
That is just his passion, and he loves Agatha Christie. He's he leaves his influence on his sleeves a lot, and I think that's really how he's always going to be. Either you're going to enjoy the writing for its fun, almost outdated way of it, because Agatha Christie stuff can feel a little outdated. I mean, we've seen all this type of stuff millions of times now, but he likes it, and he's going to keep making it. Because even like Knives Out is like deconstructing Hercules Poirot. I mean, he's pretty much deconstructing him with Daniel Craig's character. Yeah. Because the thing with Sherlock Holmes and them is they're assholes. I mean, they are just terrible people, and they don't. And the difference with him is he's trying to be a legitimately nice person. I mean, he's still got the little things about that, but he's not just like a sociopath like Sherlock Holmes and Poirot can be.
Well, and Daniel Craig's got a franchise out of it too, right? If Ryan Johnson, you're going to transition from Bond to just sitting in a chair being kind of sassy. That's a nice career move.
So now we're going to talk about our second film, which is the Ladykillers, the 1955 version, not the Coen version. So if you've been clickbaited into listening to this podcast by seeing the Ladykillers, I do apologize. So if you haven't seen it, it's basically 5 oddball criminals planning a bank robbery, rent a home and a cul-de-sac from an old widow under the pretext that they are classical musicians. Obviously, they're not classical musicians. They're essentially bank robbers. What do you guys think of this film? I've kind of weird feelings towards it. I'd like to know what you guys think.
Kind of a big meh for me.
Yeah.
Like I can't hold the movie against it too much. I mean, this movie's 60 years old. A lot of these jokes we've seen and we went through, and I guess for me, the other comedy we did on here, I've talked about not being a big comedy person. But I will say I enjoyed the French Mr. Bean movie, which I cannot remember the name of now. I enjoyed that more just because I always felt like the gags were evolving, and there was something new every few minutes. There was something different. With this film, I kind of felt like, at least for the first 2/3 of it, the same joke was getting repeated and repeated and repeated, and I just kind of I'm not gonna say got tired of it. I mean, sometimes they would be funny, but it's like she's annoying, it's interrupting their plan, she's gonna do something annoying, and it's gonna interrupt their plan, and I guess it just didn't do much for me. Now when the plot switches to the last act and it gets a little bit darker, which makes you realize why the Coen brothers wanted to remake this film in the first place, because the last bit of it is their kind of karmic tragedy, or their your comeuppance type of thing that they enjoy doing with their dark comedy. But and I give credit to the woman who played Mrs.
Wilberforce.
Yeah, I like her. I think she did a great job. I think Alec Guinness did a great job. I hope I'm saying any of these names correctly. I'm terrible with names. I think they stole the show. The rest of them were just kind of there. They were fine. They were their own archetype that you have there for the joke you need at the time. There was a joke that did make me laugh. It was the one when they were trying to figure out what to do with her. And it's like, why don't we just make it look like a suicide? I thought that was pretty funny because it kind of felt like it came out of left field, because the rest of the jokes had been kind of, that's fine. Like, I think Adam said inoffensive when I talked to him about it earlier, and I was like, yeah, they're inoffensive, and then suddenly you have a suicide joke in here about killing an old lady, so that's pretty funny.
Yeah, this film for me it's just inoffensive. It's kind of not even the kind of film that we would even generally discuss on this podcast. There's not a whole lot except for what's on surface level. There's not a ton of imagery, except for what one of the guys in our Discord was saying about it's sort of using some kind of horror tropes, and the fact that Alec Guinness's character does look like Nosferatu or Count Orlok, which I didn't really get on first watch, but you can kind of see it now. But there's not a whole lot to take that's not sort of on face value with it. I think, yeah, it's inoffensive. I don't hate this movie. This is not an Images kind of movie for me. I don't hate it. It's fine. At the same time, I'd never really go and shake someone on the street and say, you gotta watch Ladykillers. But at the same time, if it was Sunday and I was on my couch and my remote was far away and this came on, I wouldn't get up to turn it off. That's kind of the best praise I can give this movie. Someone in our in the Reddit discussion for this film when we posted it, they just kind of asked, they've heard that this is the quintessential British film, and I sort of hopped on the wagon to sort of clarify that statement, which I think is important to clarify. This film is not the quintessential British film. I don't think any film can be a quintessential of a nation, because they're all indicative of different viewpoints and different social circles and everything like that. I don't think a film can be the quintessential British film or the quintessential American film or the quintessential Irish film, whatever it is. No one film can be that. But what this film is, it is very quintessentially British. It's just everything about this film. It's sort of odd, uncanny, weird over politeness of all the characters, even all the criminals there. Like, they literally could have just bumped this old woman off and got rid of her easy peasy. If this was like a 70s crime film in America, if it's like a Scorsese film, Katie Johnson would be dead 5 minutes in. There's like, she would not have lived through this film. So it's just this kind of weird, uncanny over politeness that's sort of associated with Britain. And I think on your point about the jokes, Zach, this sort of dry humor, that was sort of indicative of this time. Obviously, that kind of changed with Monty Python when things got a bit more surreal in the 70s. But for this kind of era, it just has this sort of dry, black humor, which obviously where the sort of suicide joke and the other sort of darkly humorous moments that happen towards the end of the film, especially that sort of last scene with Alec Guinness, which I won't say just for spoilers, but that last scene that Alec Guinness has in the film is dark as hell, but it's really freaking funny, just the way it happens. But yeah, this film for me, yeah, it's inoffensive and it is quintessentially British. I made the connection between this and The Trouble with Harry, which is a really underseen Hitchcock film because it's just unlike all of his American films that he was making at the time. It's a British film. It has this droll humor. It has this sort of repetition of gag like this one has, where she keeps interrupting their plan. In The Trouble of Harry, if you've never seen it, this guy Harry basically dies in the first scene, and the people in this village are just trying to get rid of his body because they think he's been murdered, and someone thinks he's accidentally killed him when he actually hasn't. He's just died, and they basically just end up in this scenario where they have to keep moving his body to different places, and that's the trouble with Harry. And this kind of has the same sort of recurring gag the whole way through, where Miss Wilberforce, if I remember, yeah, Miss Wilberforce keeps interrupting their plan and keeps inadvertently involving herself, unbeknownst to her, to their sort of to their criminal activities. So yeah, it's just one of those sort of British sort of tropes in those sort of black comedies, really.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what y'all are saying. I think that the word charming comes to mind, which is funny considering the subject matter, but it's just a very kind of quiet, like charming comedy. I don't think it's hilarious. I'm sure the gag that you're talking about, the way the movie ends with Alec Guinness, I'm sure that caught a lot of people surprised and probably got a lot of big laughs in the, when it came out. The one thing I'll say though is that I'm kind of like low key falling in love with Cecil Parker. So by total coincidence, I saw this movie. He plays the most polite and kind of most gentlemanly of the criminals. The one other than Alec Guinness, who's always kind of over the top polite, and has a mother he's doing this crime for his mother.
Oh, the mustache guy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so I just by total coincidence, I'm working my way through the Paramount Presents releases, and I just got to the latest one, which is this old film called The Court Jester, which completely caught me off guard. It's the worst cover art I've ever seen. It makes no sense, and it doesn't do the film justice. It's a really good, funny kind of comedy musical from the actually the same year that Ladykillers came out, 55. And Cecil Parker plays a king in that movie, kind of a horny king. And his running gag in The Court Jester is that he's really excited to bring the wenches. And he sends out a caravan that's like a literal farmer's kind of like wagon, and they just go find pretty women in the community and like make them walk into like bring them into this wagon. And there's a scene in The Court Jester where there's this farmer's wagon that just comes up to the castle full of the prettiest women in the village. It's a weird, dark comedy. And he's just going on and on about the wenches, and he's so excited about it. And anyways, his performance in The Court Jester and the Ladykillers is very different. And he commands kind of both roles. Like he's one of these character actors that when he's on screen, he's sort of you want to see more of him. And so I'm kind of falling in love with him. And he, I think his character was very understated in Ladykillers, but now that I see it through the lens of what he's doing, I enjoyed it more. And on the other end, I actually, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is like not a very controversial film, but I actually didn't like the performance of Alec Guinness or Herbert Lom, who are great actors. I felt like their characters were kind of, I don't know, like the performances didn't really grab me. I thought this was for me, this was about Katie Johnson as Miss Wilberforce, and then Danny Green is like the brute who kind of like has surprisingly charming intellectual understanding of what's happening, even though he doesn't have like the words to back it up. You can see there's a deeper understanding and kind of morality with him. So I like his character, and then obviously Miss Wilberforce, and I actually really like the when she invites those women over, they come for tea and they kind of start piling in. I thought those women did a great job in that scene as well as being those kind of like busybodies, and like the joke is that they don't want to be rude, and so like the women that keep piling in for tea time, I thought was a nice gag. So maybe the supporting actors were the biggest part of the film that I enjoyed. And my wife and I both have a little bit of a love for like old British comedy, so this fits in with that. But same with you, Adam. I'm not going to run on the street. This is no Action USA. I'm not running up to anybody and declaring that they have to see this. It just kind of is what it is. It's like a quaint, kind of charming British comedy about killing an old lady.
Yeah. And I don't know if this was part of the joke, but like they made this whole thing about how smart Alec Guinness's character is supposed to be, the professor or
Huh?
whatever. I didn't think his plan was all that great. I was like, I was kind of expecting, the great train robbery, sort of thing where, there's all these pieces that have to come together. And I'm like, this isn't, he's like, this isn't this amazing plan. It works and it's fine. I never believed, I guess, that he was this incredibly smart person, but that may have been part of the joke. And, it just didn't quite land for me, but I was a little confused by that, I guess.
Ocean's 11. This is not.
Yeah.
Kind of
maybe I'm just too used to that kind of thing where, there's all this stuff put together and it feels elaborate, and that's when it's okay that there's like over planning and stuff like that. You're like, there's no way this could happen in real life, but I'm okay with it because it's kind of fun.
What is those Jesse Eisenberg and Woody Harrelson movies? Is it Now You See Me? Right? Those are like kind of the extreme of this, right?
Yeah, very extreme. Yeah. The impossibility, not the improbability.
I've seen that scene, that meme scene from the second one, where the card moves around everyone. And it's kind of like if you're ever on the Reddit, the movie Circle Jerk subreddit. I don't know if you're on that one, but it's often called like peak Kino is what they would call it. I've seen that. I've never seen any of the movies, but I've seen that scene, and it's pretty funny how stupid it is.
It doesn't make it better in context either.
Yeah, I don't know that there's too much else to say about this. I was kind of curious if y'all had a particular, favorite Alec Guinness role outside of this. I don't know if anything comes to mind for y'all.
I think his work with David Lean is his best. It's going to be a pretty standard one, but The Bridge on the River Kwai, he won an Oscar for that, and it's kind of the easy one to pick too. But yeah, I think he does great in Lawrence of Arabia, and I was telling Adam about this earlier. It's weird because that's basically blackface, but it was the '60s, and I can't say his performance was bad at all. He's very good in it. But I'm going to have to go with Bridge on the River Kwai.
And I've never seen Alec Guinness in anything other than this and Star Wars, so I'm gonna go Ben Kenobi. Ben Kenobi for $100, please, Alex. That's gonna be my answer. Yeah, even with this, it's just his voice. Like his voice does not change in this film, so if I close my eyes when he's talking, it's just old Ben talking, which is kind of jarring. Then when I open my eyes and this weird, gaunt, buck-toothed man instead. Yeah, Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi's years before he became sober. Yeah, we talk about our personal Letterboxd and Reddit kind of pages. The image that I have on my subreddit is Lawrence of Arabia, and for me, when I saw that movie, I think I don't know a lot of the technical side of film. I don't have a background in film in that sense, but I was just my eyes didn't leave the screen for, what is it, 3.5 hours? It's crazy.
It's such a beautiful film. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I just was it's weird to say, but the camera almost became the camera work almost became another story device. It was just the way that they did close-ups and the way that they did long shots and then wide shots, and just everything in that movie was just so perfectly framed and shot. And so I have a huge soft spot for that movie. So that wins out for me, I think. But
yeah, and I really want to see that on 70 millimeter. I really want to see that in theaters. Yeah. I think it's one of those films that's just necessary.
Where would you see that? Is that an IMAX screen? Where would you see that?
Around here, nowhere. I mean, that's kind of the thing. When we couldn't even get the 70 millimeter Hateful Eight when it was going around on the road show. We just don't have anywhere like that here. I know in Texas y'all have a little bit more of a film scene down there, so I don't know if that would be a little bit more common.
What's the ideal screen to see that on, though? Because I can't imagine it's just a regular movie screen, right?
Well, really the important thing is if you're doing this correctly would be more of the film itself, the actual 70 millimeter, instead of having a 35, you're having the much taller film, so it's not it's stretching and everything else. You'll get much more detail into it, and I believe the film was filmed in 65. I'd have to double check on that. Okay. But that's typically what you want in these epic films, is the bigger the screen and the using the 65 or 70 millimeter film to really bring out that detail, because then that can be the equivalent of 16, 18, 20K and a lot of times.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's the way I'd love to see it. I have the 4K, thankfully, and it looks great. But hopefully they'll make an individual, since you're a big fan of the movie.
Yeah.
So now we come into our final segment, which, as always, is our Any Other Business, where we just talk about something we've seen recently that we want to put a spotlight on. Doesn't have to be criterion, doesn't have to be good. Just if you like it and you want to talk about it. So we'll start with you, Chris. What have you seen recently that you liked and you want to put a spotlight on?
I think what I'd like to do is I finally I did the painstaking kind of hard thing. I made a top 100 list, but I did it a bit differently. So I don't trust my memory. I've been watching movies for 20 years, but I took about an 8 or 9 year break, just trying to get some businesses off the ground, and then having a son, just like a lot of life got in the way. So kind of like March or February-ish of last year was when I started really diving in again. So I didn't really trust my memory going back beyond that. So instead of a full like lifetime top 100, I just did kind of a rolling one. And I think I wound up watching well over 300 movies last year, so I imagine that's going to be the case this year as well. So it shouldn't be hard to backfill that up with with some stuff. Right now it's pretty Kurosawa heavy, because that was my big theme last year, was running through all of his entire filmography, and he's a good filmmaker. He's very talented. So my top 100 is pretty Kurosawa heavy. This year it's going to be Fellini. I'm starting here in a few weeks, so I have to imagine that's going to infiltrate in a big way. But as it stands of today, the top 10 is Rashomon, and then the Decalogue, which I don't know if y'all have any strong opinions on that. I had no idea how to break that up, so I just put it all as one film, which is probably not. It's probably cheating a bit, but Decalogue, Ikiru, adaptation, Seven Samurai, Once Upon a Time in the West, the Lubitsch film, To Be or Not to Be, Seventh Seal, Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, because Buñuel had to be up there somewhere, and then rounding out is Godard's A Woman is a Woman. Yeah, that's it. Just I really love those. I could just watch them again and again. Other than that, I think I already talked about Court Gesture, which was probably the one I would have wanted to talk about. It just completely caught me off guard, and it's one of those ones where you have to kind of trick the brain, because the cover art is so bad. It just makes it look like a terribly boring film. And I don't really like Technicolor. Like, I don't know if other people love it, but like, those rich colors and the saturation of colors kind of just put me off immediately. But this film uses it well, and it kind of really leans into the cheesiness aspect, and it has these really crazy choreographed dance numbers, kind of like almost if Busby Berkeley were trying to make like a Robin Hood tale or something, and it's just, yeah, these really elaborate dance numbers. You can tell it was a huge production, and it's also funny. Like, it's just good writing. So that one caught me off guard.
Once you watch The Red Shoes, you will learn to love Technicolor.
Okay, good to know.
That's the best Technicolor film ever.
How do you feel about like Argento's like Suspiria and stuff? That's not Technicolor, but it's using its own different process that kind of like does it brings a lot of attention to the color.
I mean, I love it. I love what he did with that. I think it's just something about, I don't even know how to best describe it. It's like a lot of the Technicolor movies, they're trying to create this, it's like reality, but like a better reality,
Yeah.
And I just don't want, I don't want it. But if it's done in like an artistic way, or where it's like the colors used for a particular reason, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, because Suspiria is more dreamlike, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, with Technicolor, the colors can almost look a bit fake, which is kind of weird to say. But yeah, Technicolor sometimes can just look a bit hokey, or it just looks like fake color. It's just kind of weird sometimes. But Red Shoes, man, that film's so good.
All right, I'll try to sneak it in here in the next 2 weeks.
Definitely.
Now, what about you? Zach?
Well, I don't have anything like under the radar to really talk about. I mentioned that I was going through a John Carpenter binge, so I'm in the middle of that. Last night I watched Big Trouble in Little China. It's one of my favorites of his. And I guess really the main thing to bring, I mean, people have talked about this movie. Everyone kind of gets the idea of it. Kurt Russell is as Jack Burton. He's a guy who thinks he's the hero of the story, and he's not. He's, the whole thing is the other guy's, he's the one trying to save the girl. He's the one that is doing all the fighting. He's really the protagonist of the film. But what I guess I really want to bring attention to here is going through these again. When you talk about genre filmmakers and trying to put these messages into their films, and with Big Trouble, you can always go into, the idea of Americans. What's the best way? But sticking their nose in foreign affairs they don't have any business being in, stuff like that. Yeah. And you don't have to read it that way. That's kind of the great thing about most of Carpenter's genre films, is even if he does have a message for it, you can enjoy it without it. And it kind of makes me appreciate him more than Paul Verhoeven. I hope I said his last name correctly. I read it all the time, but I can't do it. As much as I like his films as well, he's one of those people that I guess when he tries to put messages, if you overthink his message for more than like a minute, it seems to fall apart. Like I love RoboCop. If you actually go in through like what his message is for that film and how much center stage it takes, it's like it's not really that great of a message. It can kind of be, it kind of contradicts itself a lot. And it's just made me kind of really appreciate what Carpenter did for that. He's not known except for, obviously They Live, but even something like Big Trouble in Little China, where, there's these messages you can delve from it, especially from Jack Burton as a character. But it doesn't matter. You can read into it, but it never takes center stage over the film itself. Yeah. The film at the end of the day is supposed to be a fun romp. It's supposed to be ridiculous, and it succeeds at that. You don't have to read any of that into it, and it makes me appreciate him a lot more than Paul Verhoeven's.
Yeah, work. Paul Verhoeven would never be called subtle.
No, not at all. Like I love RoboCop, but it's revenge porn. Like it's this whole thing about like, oh well, the media causes these police states, and I'm like, great original idea. And it's like, and then it's like, well, your main character is that police state, and it's like, so it's just revenge porn. And I love RoboCop. I watch RoboCop a lot, but not for the message.
Didn't he do Showgirls as well?
Do what?
He did Showgirls as well, right?
Yeah. Showgirls is an interesting one. Like, it used to be called one of the worst. I don't know anybody to actually call it the worst film ever anymore.
It's been reevaluated. Yeah, it's been reevaluated in the last few years. I think my favorite Verhoeven would be Total Recall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Total Recall.
Yeah, it's a great film. And on the point of Big Trouble in Little China, it's kind of like the anti-white savior movie, because Jack Burton ends up getting in the way most of the time.
Yeah,
rather than actually being the white savior.
And he of course, I'm not going to spoil anything, but he does play a big part at the end. But it's an accident. It's because he's so stupid that it works out. And it really makes you. I know. Going through Carpenter interviews, it upset him so much because there was so much controversy when that movie was coming out because of that whole white savior aspect. And he casted Asian actors, and there's 3 white characters in the whole movie, and he did so much work on like the sets and doing so much work with these actors, and you can tell like it's one of those things where it's like maybe don't, and it's a problem we still have today, don't maybe judge the movie before you actually see the context of it. It could make a huge difference for it.
Would I be safe to say that you have the Arrow release?
I do, and I just ordered the Scream Factory Steelbook as well.
Okay. No, I was going to say, like, I don't know if you've seen the interview with John Carpenter. I have that one as well, The Arrow, and John Carpenter has an interview in it where he talks about how the film can sometimes be misconstrued or misunderstood, and how it kind of pisses him off that everyone thinks Jack Burton's this action hero when he's not. He's just an idiot. Like,
yeah, I mean, he's supposed to be John Wayne without a clue. That was how he was described. But Adam, what do you got?
Yeah, well, I suppose as I was mentioning earlier, I'm going to keep things that's not going to be exactly a deep cut. Blade Runner is what I watched recently as part of my the Criterion Film Challenge that's going on Letterboxd. Week 5 was to pick something that Criterion released on Laserdisc. So obviously I went through like all their Laserdisc titles, and what jumped out at me was Blade Runner because I haven't seen it in about 6 or 7 years. I bought the DVD when I was like 16 when I first started getting into film, and I literally only upgraded that DVD to Blu-ray like during the summer, but I never actually got around to watching it. So it showed up, and I thought, hey, I'll watch Blade Runner. I'll see if it holds up, because by no exaggeration, I've definitely seen, like, up until like I rewatched it, not including the most recent rewatch, I've seen that film at least 20 times, like at least, because I was just in love with it. And yeah, this I was really afraid I was gonna not like it as much. I should not have been afraid. This film is so freaking good. Everything about this movie is just an absolute masterclass, and it sort of ties into what we were talking about earlier, Ridley Scott being so hit and miss. This is his masterpiece. I know Alien fans are going to come and knock on my door now, but Blade Runner is his masterpiece. The film's oozes mood and cool. The soundtrack by Vangelis is just amazing, and everyone knows Vangelis more for Chariots of Fire, but his Blade Runner score is incredible. Harrison Ford plays the morally grey character so well. Everyone, when you watch Harrison Ford, he's snarky, but he's a hero. He's like Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford. They're a bit snarky, but they're a hero. They're not a bad person. Whereas he threads that line with Blade Runner. He has some dark moments in this film. He's morally grey, and it's probably as morally grey as you'll see Harrison Ford maybe outside of that film he did, that horror film he did. Was that What Lies Beneath or something like that? This probably the sort of earliest iteration where you'd see like a non-heroic Harrison Ford character. Sean Young is great, even though she's playing a replicant. She just has so much emotion and vulnerability in her role. Rutger Hauer, what can you really say about Rutger Hauer's role in Blade Runner? Especially that final monologue, which is just incredible. You'd have to have an absolute heart of stone to not have some sort of feeling of apathy of empathy, when Rutger Hauer does his final monologue in that film. Yeah. But what I love about it, and which I didn't really understand a whole lot when I first watched it, but I understand a lot more now, is how much of a film noir this is. So much about this film just screams noir. It has the femme fatale, it has the morally grey detective, it has just a pure atmospheric moodiness, the urban decay, the spotlights, the shadows. And even then, like, the film is kind of the plot thread, the whole sort of plot is played very loose a lot of the time as well. Which is something that you'd see a lot in film noirs. But yeah, this film, I don't give a lot of films 10 out of 10. I'm very picky when it comes to me rating a film 10 out of 10. This is one of the few films I'll say this is a 10 out of 10 perfect film. I wouldn't change a single aspect of it.
So this film, Minority Report, or what's the other one? Total Recall. Which one is your favorite Philip K. Dick story?
Oh, Blade Runner, 100%. Even though it's not very overly connected to the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. In fact, Blade Runner the title of Blade Runner is nowhere in that film. It was actually taken from a different sci-fi novel, and they thought it was a cool name. So which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Obviously the novel is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. At no point in the film are they referred to as Blade Runners. Blade Runner is not mentioned all in the film. It's literally a different title that I believe it was the first writer was Hampton Fancher. I believe he saw it on a bookshelf and thought that's a cool title. Let's buy the rights to that film just so that we can name this other film this title, which is kind of crazy. Total Recall is super fun. Like if you want to watch something that's just fun, Total Recall is where to go. But if you want to watch like a piece of art, Blade Runner all day.
This is going to be a weird comparison, but talking about Ridley Scott and how hit and miss he is. And, he's also one of those ones where the director's cut is finally where you get, like, his good movie. Because a lot of times, a lot of his good movies come out of his director's cut. You have Final Cut for Blade Runner. Alien, I can take or leave. They're the same length. They're not really much different. Take that out. But, he kind of reminds me, like, Zack Snyder reminds me a lot of that as well. The one that completely hit or miss. It almost seems like an accident when he does something right. And then he has director's cuts that tend to have more people like than his theatricals. It's just a weird comparison I thought about when you were talking about it.
I didn't realize Zack Snyder had a hit.
I personally really love Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, I forgot he made that. Yeah, I forgot
Dawn of the Dead. I like 300. Watchmen, I'll always love, even though I like I like everything with Watchmen, honestly. So I'm a big fan of his version, at least the director's cut of it. not as much the theatrical.
The films are just a bit too over stylized for me. It's kind
He's
of the same
definitely
way I
he
don't
puts
like.
a lot of style up front.
Yeah, it's kind of like with Sin City. I just can't stand Sin City because I just can't stand the over stylization of it, which I know is obviously to echo the style of the graphic novel it's based on, but it's just jarring to me to watch.
Yeah, I guess if you're doing Frank Miller, it's like directors feel like they have to. Like, I'm doing a Frank Miller comic because I mean that's the same thing with Snyder. Every comic movie he's done has been based on Frank Miller, except for Watchmen. And so I think it's just almost feel like Robert Rodriguez also felt it was like, oh yeah, we'll just go ahead and super stylize the hell out of this film and go with that.
Zack Snyder's an interesting one because I love Dawn of the Dead. I thought that was so fun, like just the reimagining of that. And then 300, and then Watchmen, and then Legend of the Guardians was pretty good actually. Did y'all see that, the animated
I
film?
do. I like that one, and the director's cut of Sucker Punch is fun. I wouldn't call it good, but it's pretty fun and
Yeah,
ridiculous.
Sucker Punch, and then all of a sudden Man of Steel just like blew chunks. Like it was so bad. I don't know if that's a widely shared opinion. I didn't like that movie at all. And then he kind of like just went downhill from there. Suicide Squad is like almost no story. Oh, he's an executive producer. I'm getting these.
No, he did BBS, and that's kind of about like talking about Last Jedi, honestly. Like, yeah, very passionate people on both sides for Batman versus Superman, and now he's doing his version of Justice League, which comes out in 2 months.
Yeah.
That's a mess of a movie as well, but I suppose we can't really blame Snyder for that too much.
No, from what I understand, only about 30 minutes of what he filmed is in that movie.
Yeah.
So
I'll reserve judgment on Justice League until I see his cut. I'll reserve judgment on Justice League because it's basically, you can't really call it a Zack Snyder. It's a Joss Whedon movie, and
it feels like a Joss Whedon movie when you watch it. You're like, yeah, this is Joss Whedon. This feels like Avengers,
except not good.
Yeah,
because at least the first Avengers movie was good.
Yeah, just not. It's like he wanted to redo Age of Ultron. For Justice League.
And that wraps up this week's episode of They Live by Film. You can catch me, Chris, and Zach on our Letterboxd or Reddit accounts, the links of which will be in the description. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at